It's a wonderful day today because we can see you again in satERdate with. Today, we have a very special guest that makes our day more special. Besides, our topic today is also special. We are going to talk about how to make extensive reading possible to conduct, even in a difficult circumstance, including book availability and rotation.
Our guest has been our role model on having such a great enthusiasm in implementing extensive reading. He is a professor at Kyoto Sangyo University, Japan, and he is also the chair of Extensive Reading Foundation.
I believe many of you have heard his name. He is Thomas Robb. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Hello. Fine, thank you.
I feel like I'm calling my own name.
Yes, I think it's good to have two Toms here. Two Toms. Okay, Tom, how is Japan?
How is Japan? Well, we're still wearing masks. Oh, I don't have my on. I hope
my
you didn't
God.
catch anything. But we're doing okay. We only have, well, this month, June, we've had about 8 new cases in Osaka Prefecture. Tokyo is much higher, 30 to 40 every day. But anyway, things are pretty much normal, except everyone is still wearing a mask.
That's great. So are you still working from home?
Yes, well, actually, I always work from home now because I'm retired from Kyoto
Right,
Sangyo
that's true.
University.
That's true.
So
Yeah.
they don't let me go there anymore. I don't have an office.
Yeah, stay at home, okay?
Tom is retired, but he's very busy. He's been doing so many things for extensive reading, right? So
Yeah.
before we start shooting you with questions, please tell our listeners a little bit about you.
Oh, I should do that?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
I thought you were going to introduce me. Okay. Well, you already know my name. I'm an American, but actually I've lived in Japan now for 47 years. So I'm Japanese in many ways, except I still have an accent and my face still looks American. But I've been teaching for a long time. Actually, at Kyoto Sangyo, I retired after 34 years teaching there. And as you know, I've been practicing extensive reading while I was there. I didn't even know it was extensive reading when I started. But someone later told me, oh, what you're doing is called extensive reading. I said, oh, really? But anyway, I graduated from Brown University in Rhode Island, the smallest state in the United States. But then I got my master's degree and my PhD degree from the University of Hawaii in Honolulu. So I sometimes go back there. But anyway, I'm very busy because of, as you said, the Extensive Reading Foundation keeps me busy. And now I'll talk a little bit later about the new MOOC, which is a way for you to take a course about extensive reading and get a certificate. And then also one thing that I do is I'm the editor of TESOL EJ, TESOL-EJ.org, which is a rather large journal. We have 4 issues a year, and in our next issue, we have 9 feature articles and then book reviews and so forth. So anyway, that keeps me busy. I have a big team of about 20 people who are helping me.
You have mentioned it a little bit, but I'm still curious to know what made you decide to work on the field of extensive reading, and actually when did you start it?
Okay. Well, I started it pretty soon after I started working at Kyoto Sangyo. And as I said, I didn't know it was extensive reading, but I was assigned some reading courses. And I knew that there wasn't enough time in class to have the students read enough. And so I found a lot of cheap books from Hong Kong, from Scholastic. They were paperback books, actually. And then I got a lot of books, because we have a nice research allowance in Japan, which allows us to just go and buy whatever we want. And so I bought a lot of books, and I put them on a cart, first a basket, but then it was too much. So then I got a cart to roll into class and put the books there. And actually, I collected money. I collected 100 yen. I can't even remember how much, 100 yen or 1,000 yen from every student, and then used that money. And then to buy the books every year. And then a couple of years later, the office found out that I was collecting money from students, and said, "You can't do that." But I need the books. And so what they did is they made a budget for me to buy the books. And then I had an official budget, and I could buy them every year, which was very nice. But the answer really is not to have a book cart outside your room. I told some of you already, but I was losing 200 books a year just because it was outside my office, so people could return books and borrow books anytime they wanted to. So I wanted the library to keep them. But when I went to the library and said, "Look, I have all these books, most of them are now hardbound, so they're very, you don't have to worry about them being destroyed quickly. Can you put them in the library?" The answer was no. And they said, "We don't have any place for them. And even if we did, we'd put them down in the basement where the students couldn't see them," and so forth. And I tried for a number of years, and the answer was always no. But finally, I managed to get the library to agree. You know why? The librarian retired. The head librarian retired. And the next one was much more receptive. So then we got the books in the library. But also, it wasn't just me. I started doing extensive reading in my class, but we had 4 and then later 8 classes at the same level with different teachers. And so I started it, and slowly the other teachers started doing it as well. And so then it became sort of official. We were all doing extensive reading, so it became institutionalized. So another thing that is rather different, you might not know, is originally we weren't doing extensive reading using books in the classroom. That was for outside the class. We had something which are called the Sra Kits, which are still published by, I think, McGraw-Hill. And it has cards at different levels, and there are 15 cards at maybe 15 different levels. And the students would take a card and read it, and then there were questions they would answer, and they would check the answers, they put it back and take another card. And that's what they were doing during class. But we did that for quite a few years, but it seemed like it was a waste of time for me, because I didn't have much to do while they were reading except go around and look at their notebooks, because they had to write a summary. 1 page for every 40 pages in the book, because I had to have some way to check if they were reading or not. With students, unless they are really excited about reading, and most students are not, even in Japan, if you ask them to read, they won't do it unless you can check it. And actually, writing a summary is not a good way, but it was the only way that we had. So they were getting more writing practice than reading practice, I think, which is fine, except there was a reading class. So then we finally found a program called accelerated reading, which we could put in the computers. And we were using that. But that was for American students, and only had books that American kids read, no graded readers. And also, the students found it very easy to cheat, because the questions were always the same for every single book. And so they memorized them, and they'd write them on their hand. And we had to actually have somebody come into the classroom at lunchtime not into the computer room at lunchtime to supervise and check underneath the keyboard that there was nothing there, and also that the name of the student that was on the screen was the same as their name on the ID card. Because sometimes I found a girl's name on the screen, but a boy sitting in the chair. And so,
My God.
so that's why we eventually came up with MReader, which I developed because it solved these problems and had the graded readers. So this mreader.org system now has almost 8,000 quizzes now for various books. So they can check their reading, or we can check the reading, and the students can check the reading by taking the quiz. And they still can cheat, but they have to be much more clever now to cheat. And so there aren't so many that cheat anymore.
Anyway, Tom, when you told us about the first time you implemented extensive reading, you said that your students, not all of them are attracted to read. So what was your strategy to attract your students to read at the first time you implement extensive reading?
Oh, that's very simple. It was part of their grade. They were required to. Now, that is not the ideal way, right? The ideal way is that you get them all excited about extensive reading. You show them an example because you like to read, and sometimes you read in the classroom, and you talk about the books and get them excited about them. That's the ideal. But the reality is it often does not work. Okay, especially if the students don't want to read, even if they're excited about it, when they get outside of school, they much prefer to be playing with their friends or doing sports or whatever. They don't have that much time. And also, they have other subjects. And extensive reading does take a lot of time. And I don't know about in Indonesia, but here we have usually 14 or 15 subjects that they're taking simultaneously because each one only meets once a week for 90 minutes. And teachers very often forget that they have work to do for some of those other subjects too. So anyway, but if it's required and you can check it, they will do it, okay? And if the books that you have, the reading material you have, is interesting, they can enjoy it. But recently there was a study that said that students preferred books that the teacher selected to books that they selected themselves, which I found rather surprising. I don't have the reference for that now, but there are reasons why students will trust a teacher's judgment more than their own judgment about what would be useful for them.
Oh, wow. Is it like based on the research?
Yes, it's a research study. Yeah.
Do you know in which setting?
It was Japanese university.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. That's surprising. I want to know the result because sometimes it could happen that they trust the teacher, or could it be like because they're just too lazy to choose the right book, so they
No, that
trust
wasn't
the
it. No, there are some very clear reasons why. And
that's why.
well, of course, I can tell you the source of the article at some point. But why don't you try it in Indonesia? Especially if everyone is reading the same book, then there is no choice anyway, right? It's only if you have a variety of books where students can choose things that they like that you can do an experiment like that. But anyway, it would be good to find out if it works in other situations, in the university and also in a secondary school.
Yeah, that's a very interesting finding, though. And I'm very curious to know that. Okay, so Tom, what do you think is the most important thing to do in the beginning of extensive reading implementation?
Well, of course, the most important thing is to have material for them to read, or they aren't going to be doing any extensive reading. But at the beginning, one of the most important things is actually to have the support of the school. But very often that's not the case. Very often, even in Japan, it's a single teacher who starts doing extensive reading in their class. And it's very difficult because if it's only one teacher, the teacher has to find the books, the teacher has to manage the books and do all of that. Whereas if it's the whole administration that is supporting it, like in secondary school, all of one level, all of those English classes once a week that all the students are taking from many different teachers, if there's one that's just for extensive reading or just for reading and they're all doing it, that makes it much easier because then the school will give you a budget and the school will probably provide some way to manage the books. So if you are starting, the most important thing is to try to get support. But very often you don't have it. So it's just the very enthusiastic teacher who starts. And if the teacher then can somehow prove to the other teachers and to the administration that it works, for example, the students are getting higher scores on their tests than the other classes. And that happened in the United Arab Emirates. There was one teacher at a high school, and she was doing extensive reading. And then twice as many students from her class qualified in the national examination compared to all the other classes at the same level. And they said, "What did you do?" And she said, "Oh, I was doing extensive reading." "What's that?" And then they actually found out, and then they all started doing it. And so it is possible. Or you can, when you start extensive reading, if you have a colleague who isn't doing it, who's teaching the same class but a different group, you can give them both some sort of a pretest of reading and another pretest of vocabulary, and then give us another one at the end. And then you have one class that has done extensive reading and one class that hasn't, who have both taken the same tests. And maybe, hopefully, you can show that, look, the ones that did extensive reading got much better scores. And you can also do an attitude questionnaire and ask the students, how much did you enjoy the reading? And you can give that to both classes, one that just was reading their textbook and whatever the teacher brought in, and show that the students like it much more. Not always. In fact, when I did a survey like that, some of the students said, "I don't like extensive reading, but I know it's good for me."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they do it. Okay, so yeah, it isn't just a matter of getting them to like it. A lot of students will do it if they know that it will help them in the future.
Right, right. Yeah, I also read one study, I think recently. It says that extensive reading helps the students' autonomy. So they are more autonomous, they become more autonomous readers, but still they claim that they don't like reading. I mean, they don't enjoy reading, but they become more autonomous. That's very interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, if you have autonomous readers or ones that are self-motivated, that's very different from the ones when you have a whole class and most of them aren't motivated, right? Like for me, for learning to read Japanese, I like mysteries. And so I picked one author whose mysteries I liked, and I read 35 of his books. And that is a really good strategy, regardless of what kind of book it is. If it's a series of books, then when you read them, you know the characters already, the author's language is similar, the vocabulary is similar, so it becomes easier and easier to read other books in the series. And it doesn't even have to be a graded reader. Even if it's not, if it's a series, once you get used to the vocabulary, the other ones will become much easier and more enjoyable to read.
Yeah, that's good. Now, talking about the reading materials that we can use for extensive reading, Tom, so what reading materials that are appropriate to be used for extensive reading?
Well, of course, the ideal material is extensive readers that are at the right level for your students. And each publisher has maybe 5, 6, or 7 levels, but probably only about 3 of those levels are the ones that will match your students, at least in the beginning. So that is the ideal. But then if you don't have them, one step down would be to use material that is for native speaking children, because there are a lot of series, and some of them I think maybe are even available in Indonesia, because books that are for kids are bought by parents just to bring home for the kids when they want them to learn. You're shaking your head like, yes, I've done that, right? Yeah. So there's a market for that, but there isn't such a market for graded readers, right? Because those are bought basically by schools. In Vietnam, Rob Waring and I went to a bookstore in Hanoi because we were going to do a presentation and we wanted to buy some graded readers to bring. We couldn't find any. There were some, but they were the highest level ones and they were all retold classics. They were using them to study literature, not for extensive reading. There were children's books and we picked up some of those, but there wasn't anything that we really had expected to buy there. And I think that's probably similar in Indonesia. Until there's a market and they know that they can actually make a profit selling graded readers, they aren't going to bring them in. And so that's why I'm saying youth readers is one possibility. Then another possibility is for teachers to take material which is online, copy it, and print it. Teachers usually have copy machines available. Can they make, I'm thinking of, say, making cards so that they can have say 100 cards with different stories on them. And then they bring them in and the students can, just like the Sra Kits, read a card and maybe do an activity that's been prepared and then go back at another one and so forth, and maybe have a list of which ones they've read and so forth. Because there is a lot of material out there. There's a person in California and his name is Rong Chang Lee, RONG hyphen CHANG, and his last name is Lee. And his internet site is wrong-chong.org or com. I can't remember which one it is. But that
It's
website,
.com, yes.
yeah. Oh, you've checked it?
Yeah, I checked it.
Okay. It has over 1,000 readings that are about 50 words or 100 words long, and they're graded. But they're graded for people who understand American cultures. So there are some things that our students might have difficulty with. But they're free, and you can download them, you can copy them, but the pages have a lot of advertisements on it because he can afford to make the site because he has advertisements on it from Google. Okay, lots and lots of advertisements, actually. It gets a little bothersome. But the nice thing is the profit that he makes from it, he uses to donate to California TESOL and International TESOL for scholarships for teachers. So it's actually a service to the organization. But since they're online, our teachers very often don't have internet access. And another problem is that if students do it online, how do we know whether they've done it or not? Okay, and so for students who are enthusiastic, they don't need us really so much because there's lots of information that is out there for them. But if we are going to have our students do something online, it's very important that it has a login method and a way for us to check what they are doing. There are good reading sites in the United States that have those features, but they cost money. They aren't free, okay? Because of course, to make good material, you have to pay somebody to write the material or pay somebody a fee to use the material. So you can't make it for free. So anyway, I think most of Rong Chong's material actually was originally made by the State Department. And I don't find it there anymore, but it's on his site. So anyway, there's a lot of material there, but since our students are in a classroom and don't have access to a computer, I have done something a bit radical. I wrote to him and said, I'd like to print out your materials so that teachers can use it in the classroom, but they have a lot of advertisements in it. Can I modify them so that it's just the text and put them in PDF files for teachers, then they could print them out and put them on individual cards, one for each reading, and let the students choose the ones they want and read them. And there's also closed tests for them. So then after they read it, they can do a closed test and check the answers, and then return it and take another one and so forth. And then they're doing a lot of reading. And of course, the whole point of extensive reading is to read a lot of words. And I said earlier, but the textbook has probably only 5,000 words in it, if that much, sometimes not even that much. And if you want them to do extensive reading, they have to read not 5,000, not even 50,000, closer to 500,000 words a year, okay? So you have to find a lot of other material because extensive reading means to read a lot, right? So anyway, you can find short readings, not just that website. There's other material you can find. You can copy it. And there's also a way, if it's a little too difficult, for you to change, using a program that's available. You can, lextutor.ca is one of them. You can then find which words are the low frequency words and then change them to easier words and so forth to make it so your students can understand it. So there's a lot of material that is available. But you do have to have reading material of some sort in order to start extensive reading.
That's true. That's lots of work of Rongcheng, and of course you, because you try to recreate what Rongcheng has in his website, and you change that into PDF file, and you try to make them more accessible for teachers. Thank you very much, Tom. It's such a great work.
Yeah, it was actually sort of fun because for every single file, I had to get the code for the file and then delete all the advertisement code to leave just the part that we wanted the students to see. So I had to do that. Right now, I've done it for about 600 files. Not one by one. It's possible to do the ones that are similar at one time because they all have the same thing in the same place. And so you can say, all of these files, delete this, and zap, it's all gone. But still, it did take a lot of time to make them usable. And so I'm going to make them, actually, I can tell you the URL where the PDFs are. It's very easy. It's just, I'll paste it into the chat box as well. It's just tiny, wait a minute, where is the chat box? tinyurl.com/ERF, all capitals, hyphen, capital F free, just the F is capital, and then hyphen, and reading with the R. So there are only 6 capital letters in it. So tinyurl.com, ERF-free-reading. And you can find all the PDF files there and the closed files there and print them out. But just don't put them on the internet, because if they're going to use the internet, they should use the original files so they can see the advertisements and he can make more money for scholarships. Okay,
Sure.
But for your internal use, please.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak Tom. Okay, talking about graded readers book, actually, we are curious, what are the best ways to manage the materials? I mean, how to decide the levels and also the color codes, because we know that graded readers come from many different publishers and have different standards of leveling, right?
Right. Well, I just made a whole module for the ER MOOC on this problem because it's very complicated, because nothing is the same. For example, Rob Waring made something which we call the ERF scale for graded readers, and he has them by the number of headwords. So 0 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 200 headwords. And he has 20 different categories slowly going up in difficulty. Well, that looks very nice, but it turns out if you look at what the publishers say the CFR level is for them, you find that just for the same headwords, one publisher says this is elementary or A1 and another one says this is B1. but they both have the same number of headwords. So the number of headwords is not by itself an indicator of how difficult the book is. And also, if you look at something, there's in the United States, there's the Lexile system, which works well for grading books for native speakers. But if you compare that, you find a huge difference. One book, two books which have the same headwords have huge different numbers for the Lexile ratings. And so the best way is for you to look at the book and say, I think this is okay for my students. There's always the Fivefinger Rule, which I know Lanoke and Yuseva have used in their talks, which means that you just look at an average page and see how many words you think you or your students would not know. And if there's only one or two, okay. If there are five, put it down. It's too difficult. Of course, it depends how many words are on the page, how many difficult words you're going to find. But that is one way. Another way is to find out what books other teachers or other students have enjoyed. And if other students enjoy them, then your students maybe will enjoy them too. Now, on my mreader.org site, we ask the students every time they finish a book how well they liked it, how many times they had to look up words in their dictionary, how long approximately it took, and so forth. We have 5 different questions that we ask. And the results of that are available on the ER Foundation website, okay? In one of the categories under graded reading, the heading is graded readers, and you can find that information and you can see what the relative evaluation was of different books. Of course, 60% of the students who are using mReader are Japanese, so it's what Japanese like, which might not be the same as what Indonesians like, okay? And that's another area where a lot of research is needed, actually, to see if we can find out if basically students around the world like the same kind of books. Actually, I think the answer is no, because the Oxford Bookworm series, for example, has a lot of stories which are sort of dark, horror stories, and ones that are sad and so forth. And I've heard people say, well, that's what Europeans like. They like that kind, but perhaps Asians don't. So the genre that people like may vary. And of course, it may vary by gender too. So anyway, these are all things which actually haven't been sufficiently researched. So they're challenges for all of us for the future.
Okay. Wow. I believe that this information is very useful, and it's a new useful thing for Sobat Malming in Indonesia, Tom. Okay, so...
Well, actually, I have one more thing to add.
Sure.
One other possibility is if you go to the mreader.org site without logging in, and there's one tab at the top called About mReader, and inside it, there's a Kyoto scale, which shows a comparison and shows all the books, say, at the mReader level 1 from the different publishers. And you will see that if you look at that table, that one publisher's level 1 is at the starter level, and another publisher's level 1 is at level 5. And so this table, which is free for you to look at and use, maybe would be helpful for finding it. And you can also actually go to the available books on mreader.org and put in a title, and you can find out what the level rating is for that book on the mReader scale. You can even do that from your phone if you're in the bookstore.
Right, right. Okay, yeah, I think like book leveling is also one thing that is still challenging and have been questioned a lot by Indonesian teachers. Maybe we can have like one session in webinar for you, Tom, to explain about the whole things about book leveling later. Okay, yeah. Another thing that makes me also curious is about how to circulate the books. Like for me, your idea of book circulation, I think is a very great idea, especially in a setting where books are not really available. So like,
Mhm.
what is your suggestion to circulate books and how to
You
make it
mean
possible?
by sharing books between schools? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the idea basically is to have some sort of container. They could even be suitcases, I suppose, that could hold 100 or 200 books each. And you get 5 suitcases and you put different books in each of them. And then you have 5 schools and you send them to the schools. And in 1 month, you circulate them. They go to a different school and they go around from school to school that way. Of course, some are going to get damaged, some are going to get lost, and so they'll need to be replaced. But it would just take a number of schools to cooperate, and of course, money to get the books to begin with. But I think it would be an interesting model to see if it really works, because if it does, maybe even the local ministries of the different provinces. Do you call them provinces or states in Indonesia, or do you have all sorts of different
Uh,
entities?
Provinces.
Okay, well, at that level, perhaps, or even at the city level, schools could make several suitcases or boxes of books which could be displayed. The ideal one would be some sort of wooden box that could actually open up and become a bookshelf itself when it's open and then closed for sending. But that would take a little designing to do. But I think something like that could work as long as somebody grabs the bull by the horns, as we say in English, and tries to do it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Anyway, Tom, you mentioned a little bit before about your MOOCs.
Yes. All right.
Maybe
Well,
yeah, maybe
I'm
you can
happy
tell
to
us a
talk
little
about
bit
it.
about that.
Sure.
Mm.
A lot of the questions we've been talking about, I've tried to answer already on the MOOC, because the MOOC is an online course. You have to enroll and then start at the beginning and go through the various units. Some of them are required and some of them are optional. And let's see, I'm trying to remember what some of the names of some of the ones are. Well, what is extensive reading, of course, is the beginning one. And then one about what the difference is between intensive reading and extensive reading. There's a very long one on how to grade the readers, okay? And another on how to uh, have a system for checking the books out and storing the books and so forth. So there are all these different ones, and each one has some discussion questions before, and then there's a video that you watch, which is not so long, 8 minutes. One of them is 15 minutes. It's too long, but I couldn't make it shorter. And then a quiz afterwards, and then discussion with the other members who are also studying the MOOC, and then you can go on to the next section. And if you can finish 12 of the modules, there'll be more modules, so some of them are optional, but if you can finish 12 of the modules, then you can get a certificate from the Extensive Reading Foundation saying that you have completed the Extensive Reading MOOC. And if you're interested in it, the URL is just HTTPS, of course, ER-MOOC.org, all small letters. And if you go there at the bottom, there's a place to create an account. It's actually a Moodle. And so if you're familiar with Moodles, it'll make it easier for you. But anyway, at the bottom, there's a place to create an account. You put in your name, your email address, a password, and so forth. You get an email, which you have to confirm that this is actually your email address, and then you have an account. And then you can enter the MOOC, and it'll ask you for a key. And the key is simple. It's just capital ER, extensive reading, =, better learning, with the B and the L capitals, okay? And that gets you into the MOOC. And that same information is on the IERA Facebook page if you look there.
Wow. I will definitely join that MOOC, Pak Tom. It sounds so good and interesting.
Well, I hope it is, and I'm looking forward to hearing what more you would like to have there. And they also, every single one of the videos has a transcription of the speaker. The
Oh.
speaker is always me right now. I
Okay.
I actually don't like to be the speaker like that, but everyone is so busy that it turned out that I was the only one with time because I'm retired.
And I think like you're very dedicated because one of my friends actually already joined the MOOC and he told me because he disappeared for about like some days, like he didn't return, and then you emailed him. He told me
I
that you
know who
emailed
you're
him.
talking about. Yes.
He's actually very into extensive reading and want to learn more about it. But yes, I think the challenge is like the working load of the teachers that sometimes they are they are tempted to do something else than to be more dedicated on it. Yeah, but
Yeah,
he told me about it.
yeah, that sounds just like our students.
Yeah.
They want to do it, but they don't, right?
Yeah. That is a challenge, I think.
Yeah, that's true. That's why actually I sent him a reminder, and yeah, I intend to continue to
Yeah.
remind people to keep it going, especially now at the beginning, because we need more people so we can get more information about what works or what's not clear and so forth. So I hope you can take a look at it and go through it. And if you don't have so much time to actually officially go through it and aren't interested in the certificate, I can give you a separate password so you can just watch the videos, for example. But it's a secret. You'll get it, but don't tell anybody else.
I get it. I have it, don't worry.
Yeah, Yuseva already has it. That's right.
Yeah, that's good. That's
Okay.
good. I've watched it.
Okay, wow. I really learned a lot from Pak Tom today, seriously. And I do believe Sobat Malming also learns a lot from Pak Tom today. But unfortunately, it is getting late for Bu Yuseva, I think.
Oh, Yuseva is already sleeping now.
Well, actually, for me, it's getting late. It's past my
Yeah.
lunchtime.
Yeah. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Sorry.
So next time you're in Yogyakarta, Bu Lanoke will treat you double, Tom.
Yeah, double
Lanoke only.
Okay, great.
lunch. So we are about to end our session, but before we end our session, as usual, we will have two trivia questions for our special guests. So these two questions will be for you, Tom. Please answer without thinking. So
Oh,
the
no.
first question, what is your favorite book?
My favorite book. Oh dear. I
You're
don't read so
thinking.
No
much.
thinking.
No, no.
No
Well,
thinking.
I can't say favorite book. I actually read a lot on my phone, but I read mainly mysteries, and so there isn't just one because there's suspense mysteries, and I read one after another. I have maybe over 100 different books on my phone that I've read already, and more are
Wow.
waiting.
Wow. Okay, the second question. Where is your favorite place or spot to read, Pak Tom?
My favorite place to read. Um, it used to be on the train, but now I don't commute. Yeah, I don't commute anymore. So it's usually just lying in a lounge chair, a flat chair with my iPad. Is my favorite place to read. I don't read outside. Oh, one
Okay.
place I do read is when I'm using the exercise bicycle in the gym. Yeah,
Oh.
and
So you're
I
exercising and
find
reading at
it,
the same time.
yeah, because I could do it at the same time. And at that time, I'm not using it anymore because my doctor says I shouldn't be using my ankles right now. But anyway,
Oh.
I used to only do it there. And so that gave me motivation to exercise because that was the only place I could see what happened next in the story. I did that with Harry Potter when I was jogging too. I was listening to it, but I would only listen to it when I was jogging. And so if I wanted to find out what happened next, I had to go for a jog.
Ah,
Good.
that's
Oh
a very
yeah,
good
that's a good
idea.
motivation. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice, nice,
Anyway,
very nice.
thank you so much for your answers, Pak Tom. Nice answers.
Wow, yeah, I think that is a very new thing to try, yeah. Mas Thomas.
Yeah.
Now I call
Yeah, sure.
the other one is Mas Thomas and the other one is Pak Thomas. Okay. So Mas Thomas, try that at home, okay? Do some exercises while reading. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, it's been a wonderful day, and we had so much time and so much fun learning with you, Pak Tom. Thank you so much for making time to be with us today. We really appreciate it. I guess this is the end of our satERdate with session today, and thank you for listening, and we'll see you again next week.
Well, I certainly enjoyed it. Goodbye.
Yeah, thank you
Bye.
so much, Pak Tom.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, and
Bye.
thank you so much, Sobat Malming. See you next week. Stay happy and healthy. Bye. See you.
Bye.
Bye.